I've seen power in many forms. I've watched men in $1,000 suits command rooms with a single glance. I've witnessed deals made over wine that could change entire cities. But I've never seen power quite like what happened that night at La Serena Blue. See, real power isn't about money or muscle. It's about the moment when someone who's been invisible suddenly becomes unforgettable. And trust me, what I'm about to tell you, you won't believe until you hear every word. The restaurant was packed that Tuesday evening. Golden lights spilled across white tablecloths, and the air smelled like garlic, wine, and expensive cologne. Laughter echoed off the walls. Important people were doing what important people do, pretending everyone else didn't exist. And in the corner, at the best table in the house, sat a man who thought he owned the world. His name was Luciano Marcelli. You might not know that name, but in certain circles, it carried weight heavier than gold. He sat there with 3 of his men, all of them dressed like they just stepped out of a magazine. Dark suits, slicked hair, watches that cost more than most people's cars. They were loud, confident, the kind of confident that comes from never being told no. And why would they be? Luciano Marcelli was Mafia royalty. His family controlled half the port, owned judges, and had fingers in businesses from New York to Naples. When he laughed, people around him laughed. When he frowned, they disappeared. But here's the thing about arrogance. It makes you blind. Standing a few feet away, holding a tray of empty glasses, was a young woman named Alara. She was 24, maybe 25. Quiet. The kind of quiet that people mistake for simple. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and her uniform was pressed and clean despite working a double shift. She moved through the restaurant like a shadow, invisible to everyone who mattered, or so they thought. Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. Luciano was halfway through his second bottle of wine when it happened. One of his men said something, and they all erupted in laughter. Then Luciano turned, looked at Alara as she passed, and spoke in Italian. Beautiful, rolling Italian that most Americans wouldn't understand. His voice was smooth, almost musical. Guarda quella, he said to his friends, tilting his head toward her. She's pretty enough, but look at those eyes. The eyes of a servant. Born to serve, nothing more. His men chuckled. One of them nodded. Another raised his glass like it was a joke worth celebrating. They had no idea she understood every single word. Alara stopped, just for a heartbeat. Her back was still turned to them, her hands steady on the tray. The noise of the restaurant continued around them, forks scraping plates, conversations overlapping. But something shifted in the air, something dangerous and electric. She turned slowly. Her face was calm. No anger, no embarrassment, just calm. She walked back to their table, set down the tray with perfect grace, and looked Luciano Marcelli directly in the eyes. Then she spoke, in flawless Italian, every word clear, every syllable sharp as broken glass. Signor Marcelli, she said, her voice quiet but steady, you're right about one thing. I do serve. I serve people who deserve respect. But a man who insults a woman he doesn't know, in a language he assumes she doesn't speak, isn't powerful. He's just afraid. Afraid that if he treated people with dignity, they might see him for what he really is. Empty. The restaurant didn't go silent all at once. It was like a wave. Conversations died table by table. Forks stopped midair. Even the kitchen seemed to hold its breath. Luciano's men stared at her like she'd just pulled a gun. One of them opened his mouth, then closed it. No one had ever spoken to Luciano Marcelli like that. No one. Luciano himself sat frozen, his glass halfway to his lips, his eyes locked on hers. For the first time in maybe his entire life, he had no words. His jaw tightened, his face flushed, not with rage but with something worse. Shame. Public, undeniable shame. Alara didn't wait for a response. She picked up her tray, gave a small, polite nod, and walked toward the kitchen. Her steps were steady, her head high. She didn't look back. And Luciano Marcelli, heir to one of the most dangerous families in the country, sat there in the wreckage of his own arrogance, unable to do anything but watch her go. That night, The Mafia heir learned something every king eventually learns. Words, when chosen right, can cut deeper than any blade. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room isn't the one everyone fears. It's the one everyone underestimated. So here's my question for you. Have you ever witnessed the exact moment someone's arrogance crumbled right in front of you? Have you ever seen respect given to someone who earned it the hard way? If you have, or if this story just made your heart race a little faster, hit that like button. Because what happens next, you won't see coming. And trust me, this is only the beginning. You want to know the truth about Alara? She wasn't always the quiet waitress in the corner. That's the part most people don't understand. When you see someone serving tables, cleaning up after strangers, you assume that's all they've ever been. You assume their world has always been small. But every person carrying a tray has a story. And Alara's story would break your heart. 6 years before that night, at La Serena Blue, Alara was different. She wore clean dresses, carried books under her arm, and walked through the halls of Columbia University like she belonged there. Because she did. She was studying linguistics, 3 languages already mastered, working on her 4th. Her professors called her brilliant. Her father called her his pride. She had a future that looked nothing like dirty dishes and 12-hour shifts. Her father owned a small import business. Nothing fancy, but honest work that kept them comfortable. He'd raised her alone after her mother passed when Alara was 7. He taught her that respect wasn't given, it was earned. That words mattered more than money. That kindness was a choice you made every single day, especially when no one was watching. She loved him for that. She loved him for everything. Then he got sick. Cancer, the kind that moves fast and doesn't ask permission. Within 6 months, he was gone. And that's when Alara's world didn't just change. It shattered. Her stepmother, a woman her father had married just 2 years before his death, didn't waste time. 3 weeks after the funeral, Alara came home to find her belongings in boxes on the front porch. The house, the business, everything her father built, it all went to the stepmother. Legal, clean, final. Alara had been so focused on her grief, she never saw it coming. Her father had trusted his new wife, and that trust had cost his daughter everything. So there she was, 20 years old. No home, no money, no family. Her scholarship covered tuition, but not living expenses, and New York doesn't care about your sob story. The city will chew you up and spit you out before you finish crying. She had 2 choices: drop out and survive, or keep fighting a battle she'd already lost. She chose survival. She had to. La Serena Blue wasn't much, but it was something. The owner, an older Italian man named Giorgio, saw something in her. Maybe he recognized the sadness. Maybe he just needed reliable help. Either way, he gave her a job, and she took it. No complaints. No drama. She showed up early, worked late, smiled when she was supposed to, and went home to a tiny apartment she shared with 2 other girls who barely knew her name. Every morning, she woke up to the smell of salt from the harbor and lemon from the restaurant kitchen. She tied her hair back, put on her uniform, and became invisible. That's what people wanted from servers. To be there when needed and gone when not. She learned to read a room, to know when someone wanted conversation and when they wanted silence. She learned to swallow her pride, to accept tips from people who wouldn't remember her face 5 minutes later. But here's what they didn't know. At night, after her shifts, she'd go home and open her old textbooks. She'd practice her Italian, her French, her Spanish. She'd read until her eyes burned and her mind refused to hold another word. Because giving up her education didn't mean she'd stopped learning. It just meant no one was watching anymore. Her world had shrunk overnight. From library halls and lecture rooms to trays of dirty plates and grease-stained aprons. From dreams of translation work at the UN to hoping she'd make enough in tips to cover rent. But she didn't break. She bent, sure. Life had bent her so far she thought she might snap. But she didn't. And maybe that's what made her dangerous. Not her beauty, not her intelligence, but the fact that she'd lost everything and still refused to lose herself. Life wasn't done with her yet. It was only preparing her stage. Because 6 years later, in that crowded restaurant, in front of a man who thought he owned the world, all those years of bending would finally teach her how to stand. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever had someone look right through you like you didn't matter, drop a comment. Tell me you know your worth. Because silence isn't weakness. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who's been learning the whole time. Trust me, this story is just getting started. You ever walk into a room and just know something's about to go wrong? That's what it felt like the first time Luciano Marcelli stepped into La Serena Blue. The air changed. I'm not being dramatic. I mean, it literally changed. Conversations got quieter. Shoulders tensed. Even Giorgio, the owner, a man who'd run that restaurant for 30 years and feared no one, went pale. It was a Thursday evening around 7. The dinner rush was just starting. Alara was in the back, tying her apron, getting ready for another long night. She didn't know yet. Didn't know that her life was about to collide with someone who could destroy it without thinking twice. The door opened, and Luciano walked in. He didn't walk like normal people. He moved like the ground should be grateful he was stepping on. Tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hairstyle just messy enough to look intentional. His suit probably cost more than Alara made in 6 months. Black, perfectly tailored, with a watch on his wrist that caught the light like a threat. But it wasn't the clothes that made you stare. It was his face. Handsome didn't cover it. He had the kind of face that made people forget what they were saying. Sharp jaw, dark eyes that looked like they could see through walls, and a smile that never quite reached those eyes. Dangerous, beautiful. The kind of beautiful that came with a price. Behind him, 3 men filed in. His crew. They didn't look like bodyguards exactly, but you knew what they were. The way they scanned a room. The way their jackets hung, just a little heavy on one side. They weren't there to enjoy the food. Giorgio rushed over immediately, wiping his hands on his apron, his smile too wide, too nervous. "Signor Marcelli, welcome, welcome. Your usual table." His voice cracked slightly. Luciano didn't even look at him, just nodded once, and Giorgio practically ran to clear the corner booth. The staff moved like mice when a cat enters the room. Quick, careful, trying not to be noticed. One of the older waitresses whispered to Alara, "That's Luciano Marcelli. Don't stare. Don't speak unless spoken to. And whatever you do, don't mess up his order." Alara glanced at the corner booth. She'd heard the name before. Everyone had. The Marcellis owned half the neighborhood, maybe more. They weren't the kind of family you crossed. They were the kind of family that made problems disappear. Permanently. But Alara had served difficult customers before. Rude ones. Entitled ones. She could handle one more. Or so she thought. Luciano sat down, his men flanking him. He didn't look at the menu. Didn't need to. He ordered in Italian, his voice smooth, confident, bored. Like he'd done this 1,000 times and would do it 1,000 more. The waitress taking his order nodded, so fast her pen almost flew out of her hand. Everything was fine for the first 30 minutes. Orders came out. Wine was poured. Luciano and his men talked in low voices, occasionally laughing at jokes no one else would understand. The restaurant started to relax. Maybe tonight would be okay. Maybe he'd eat, pay, and leave without incident. Then Alara brought out the second bottle of wine. She approached the table carefully, professionally, the bottle balanced perfectly in her hand. She'd done this hundreds of times. But as she reached to pour, one of Luciano's men shifted suddenly, bumped the table, and the bottle tipped. Just slightly. Just enough. 3 drops of red wine splashed onto the white tablecloth near Luciano's hand. Time stopped. The man who'd bumped the table went white. The entire restaurant seemed to freeze. 3 drops. That's all it was. But in that moment, it felt like the end of the world. Alara didn't panic. She grabbed a clean cloth from her apron, stepped forward, and calmly began to blot the wine. "My apologies, Senior," she said quietly, her voice steady. "Let me get you a fresh setting." Luciano looked at the drops, then at her. His eyes were cold, calculating, like he was deciding something important. For a second, she thought he might explode, might flip the table, might do whatever men like him did when things didn't go their way. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and smiled. Not a kind smile. A smile that said he found something amusing. "Careful," he said in English, his accent thick but clear. "In my world, mistakes have consequences." She met his eyes. Just for a second. long enough to show she wasn't afraid, even though her heart was hammering. "In mine too, Senior," she replied. Then she finished cleaning, took the cloth, and walked away. Behind her, she heard one of his men laugh nervously. Heard Luciano say something in Italian she couldn't quite catch. But she felt his eyes on her back the whole way to the kitchen. And that's when his arrogance collided with her dignity. Two forces that should never have met. Two worlds that had no business touching. But they had. And neither of them knew it yet. But that collision was about to change everything. Ever met someone who thought they owned the world? Someone who looked at you like you were nothing? Keep watching. Because this one's for every humble heart that's ever been looked down on. And trust me, what comes next will make you believe in justice again. Here's what you need to understand about respect. It's not given because someone's powerful. It's not earned through fear or money or the weight of a last name. Real respect comes from one place. Truth. And the truth, when spoken at the right moment, can bring empires to their knees. 20 minutes after the wine incident, Luciano and his men were deep into their meal. The tension had eased. Laughter returned to their table, loud and careless. They'd moved on, forgotten about the quiet waitress and the 3 drops of wine. In their world, people like Alara didn't matter long enough to remember. But Alara hadn't forgotten. She was in the back, stacking plates, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind worked through what had just happened. The threat in his voice, the amusement in his eyes. Like she was entertainment. Like her dignity was a joke he could afford to make. She'd heard men like him before, dealt with their comments, their looks, their assumptions. She'd learned to swallow it, to smile politely, to cash her tips and go home. But something about tonight felt different. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was 6 years of being invisible finally catching up. Or maybe it was just time. She picked up another tray and headed back out to the floor. Luciano was telling a story. Something about a business deal gone wrong. A competitor who'd gotten too confident. His men were hanging on every word, laughing at all the right moments. He was in his element, king of his little corner of the world. Then he saw Alara pass by and decided to make her part of his story. He switched to Italian mid-sentence, smooth as silk, knowing most of the restaurant wouldn't understand. "Guarda quella," he said, gesturing lazily toward her with his wine glass. "Look at that one." His men glanced over, smirks already forming. "She's pretty enough, I'll give her that. But look at those eyes." He paused for effect, took a sip of wine. The eyes of a servant. Born to serve, nothing more. Some people are just made for certain things, you know? She'll be carrying plates until she's old and gray, and she'll never even realize there was supposed to be more. His men laughed. One of them nodded like Luciano had just said something profound. Another raised his glass in agreement. It was cruel, casual, the kind of cruelty that comes easy when you've never faced consequences. But Alara had stopped walking, 3 tables away, her back to them, the tray steady in her hands. Every word had landed exactly as intended, every insult perfectly clear. For 5 seconds, she stood there, breathing, thinking, deciding. The restaurant noise continued around her. Forks on plates. Low conversations. The kitchen door swinging open and closed. But in her head, it was silent. Just her and a choice. She could keep walking. Pretend she didn't understand. Cash out at the end of her shift and go home. Safe. Smart. Expected. Or she could do something she'd never done before. She could stop being invisible. She turned around. Slowly. Deliberately. Set the tray down on a nearby table. And walked straight toward Luciano Marcelli. His men saw her coming first. One of them nudged Luciano, eyebrows raised. Luciano looked up, curious, that same amused smile playing at his lips, wondering what the pretty waitress could possibly want. She stopped at the edge of their table, looked him dead in the eye, and spoke, in perfect Italian, every word clear, every syllable chosen with surgical precision. "Signor Marcelli," she began, her voice quiet but steady enough to cut through the noise. "You're right about one thing. I do serve. I serve people who deserve respect. But a man who insults a woman he doesn't know, in a language he assumes she doesn't speak, isn't powerful. He's just afraid. Afraid that if he treated people with dignity, they might see him for what he really is. Empty. The effect was immediate. Devastating. His men froze mid-laugh. One of them actually choked on his wine. The tables nearest them went silent first. Then the silence spread like a wave across the entire restaurant. Conversations died. Forks stopped midair. Even the music from the kitchen seemed to fade. Luciano's face went through 3 emotions in 2 seconds. Surprise. Confusion. Then something worse than anger. Shame. Public, undeniable, irreversible shame. His jaw tightened. His hand gripped his wine glass so hard his knuckles went white. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time in maybe his entire life, Luciano Marcelli had no response. No clever comeback. No threat. Nothing. Alara didn't wait. She'd said what needed saying. She gave a small, polite nod, the kind you'd give any customer, picked up her tray, and turned toward the kitchen. Her steps were steady, her head high. She didn't run, didn't hurry, just walked like she'd done nothing more remarkable than take an order. Behind her, the silence held. Luciano sat frozen, his face flushed, his men not daring to look at him. The entire restaurant had just watched a waitress dismantle a mafia heir with nothing but truth and perfect grammar. He'd been publicly humbled by someone he thought beneath him, and everyone knew it. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't care about your bank account or your last name or how many people fear you. It just exists, and when spoken right, it lands like a hammer. If you love seeing pride meet its match, hit that like button right now. And tell me, what would you have said in her place? Would you have stayed silent or spoken up? Because what happens next, you won't believe. This story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. 2 days. That's how long it took for the impossible to happen. 2 days of Alara waking up, expecting consequences. Expecting to lose her job. Expecting worse. Because you don't embarrass a man like Luciano Marcelli and walk away clean. That's not how the world works. At least, that's not how she thought it worked. She'd gone to work the next day, ready to be fired. Had even practiced what she'd say to Giorgio when he pulled her aside. But Giorgio said nothing. Just gave her a strange look, somewhere between respect and concern, and told her to work her normal shift. No one mentioned what happened. Not the other servers. Not the cooks. It was like the whole restaurant had agreed to pretend that night never existed. But Alara couldn't pretend. Every time the door opened, her heart jumped. Every time she heard Italian being spoken, her hands shook just slightly. She kept working, kept smiling, kept moving through the restaurant like everything was fine. But she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on Saturday evening. 6 o'clock. The dinner rush just starting. The door opened, and there he was. Luciano Marcelli. But different this time. Alone. No crew. No bodyguards. No audience. Just him, in a dark coat and jeans, looking almost normal. Almost. Alara was refilling water glasses when she saw him. Her hands went still. He scanned the restaurant until his eyes found her. Then he walked straight toward her table. No hositashchen. No games. Can I talk to you? He asked. In English this time. His voice was different too. Quieter. Missing that edge of arrogance she'd heard before. Every instinct told her to say no. To run. To do anything but stand there and engage with a man who could make her disappear with a phone call. But something in his face stopped her. He looked tired. And for the first time since she'd met him, he looked human. My shift ends in 20 minutes, she said carefully. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks down. He nodded. I'll wait. 23 minutes later, Alara sat across from Luciano Marcelli in a corner booth of the cheapest coffee shop in the neighborhood. Her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. His espresso sat untouched. The place was nearly empty, just an old man reading a newspaper and a college kid with headphones buried in a laptop. Luciano spoke first. I need to apologize. The words came out like they hurt, like he wasn't used to saying them. What I said about you that night was wrong. Completely wrong. And I'm sorry. Alara studied his face, looking for the angle, the manipulation. Men like him didn't apologize unless they wanted something. You assumed I wouldn't understand you, she said finally. That's the part that bothers me most. You felt safe being cruel because you thought I was too ignorant to know. I know. He looked down at his espresso. I've been thinking about it for 2 days. About what you said. About being empty. He laughed. but there was no humor in it. You were right. I'm surrounded by people who tell me I'm important, who laugh at my jokes because they're afraid not to, who never, ever tell me the truth. He looked up at her. You told me the truth, and it terrified me. Why are you here? Alara asked. Really? You could have just stayed away, pretended it never happened. Your life would have gone on exactly the same. Because I can't stop thinking about it. He leaned forward slightly. Do you know how rare it is for someone to look at me and see past all the rest? The name, the money, the reputation? You looked at me and saw exactly what I am. And instead of being afraid, you called me out. He paused. When was the last time someone spoke to you like you were nothing? The question caught her off guard. She thought about her stepmother, about the boxes on the porch, about professors who stopped returning her emails after she had to drop out. More times than I can count, she said quietly. Then you know what it feels like, Luciano said, to be reduced to one thing, one label, one assumption. I did that to you, and I'm sorry. The silence between them shifted, less hostile, less certain. Alara took a sip of her tea, buying time to think. This wasn't how she'd expected this conversation to go. She'd expected threats or manipulation or cold transaction, not vulnerability, not honesty. You were arrogant, she said finally. You still are, probably, but at least now you know it. A faint smile crossed his face. Then maybe I'm surrounded by the wrong people. He stood up, pulled out his wallet, and left enough cash on the table to cover both drinks and a tip that was way too much. Thank you for meeting me, and for what you said that night. I needed to hear it. He turned to leave, then stopped. My name's Luciano, by the way, in case you wanted to know. I know who you are, Alara said. No, he replied, looking back at her. You know my name? You don't know me. But maybe, if I'm lucky, someday you will. Then he walked out into the evening, leaving Alara alone with cold tea and questions she didn't have answers for. And that's how a rivalry turned into an unexpected bond. How hate became curiosity. How two people from completely different worlds found themselves standing at the edge of something neither of them understood yet. Do you believe people can truly change? Comment yes or no below, because this next part might surprise you. Might challenge everything you think you know about redemption. And trust me, you're going to want to stay for this. You know what's dangerous? Not guns or money or power. It's caring about someone you shouldn't. That's the kind of dangerous that sneaks up on you, disguises itself as friendship, and by the time you realize what's happening, it's already too late to turn back. 3 weeks after that coffee shop conversation, Luciano started showing up at La Serena Blue. Not with his crew, not making a scene. Just him, sitting at a quiet table in the corner, ordering simple meals, reading the newspaper like any other customer. Except he wasn't any other customer, and everyone knew it. At first, Alara avoided him. She'd let other servers handle his table, stay busy in sections far from where he sat. But he was patient. He'd wait until she passed by, then ask simple questions. How was her day? Was the weather always this cold? Did she have any recommendations from the menu? Normal things. Safe things. The kind of questions that didn't require her to let her guard down. But slowly, conversation by conversation, something shifted. She'd stop at his table for a moment between orders. Answer his questions with more than one word. Eventually, she'd even ask questions back. Nothing personal, nothing dangerous. Just two people talking across a distance that was starting to feel less impossible. One evening, he asked about her accent. Said he detected something beneath her English, something precise and careful. She admitted she'd studied linguistics. His eyebrows raised. Why aren't you doing that now? He asked. She gave him the short version. School, father, loss, survival. He listened without interrupting, without that pity face people usually made. When she finished, he just nodded and said, that takes strength. Most people would have broken. Another night, she asked him why he came alone now. Where were his friends? He laughed, but sounded hollow. Those aren't friends, he said. They're employees, associates, people who need me for something. You learn the difference eventually. There was loneliness in his voice that surprised her, made her see him differently, not as the arrogant man from that first night, but as someone trapped in a role he didn't choose. The conversations grew longer. He'd stay until closing sometimes, nursing a single coffee, talking about everything and nothing. Books they'd both read, places they wanted to travel, stupid jokes that made her laugh despite herself. He was smart, she realized, genuinely smart, when he wasn't performing for an audience, and funny, and surprisingly kind to the staff, leaving tips that made Giorgio's eyes water. But Alara wasn't naive. She knew who he was, knew what his family did. The import business they ran wasn't just importing olive oil and wine. Everyone knew that, even if nobody said it out loud. There were rumors, stolen art, money laundering, worse things whispered in corners. And Luciano was being groomed to take it all over someday. She asked him about it once. Directly, "Are you a good person, Luciano?" They were sitting in that same coffee shop, weeks after their first meeting. He'd started walking her home after late shifts, always keeping a respectful distance, never pushing for more than she offered. He stared into his espresso for a long time. "I don't know," he said finally. "I think I want to be, but wanting and doing are different things. My family, they have expectations. A legacy. I was born into it, trained for it, and walking away from that." He trailed off, and she saw fear flash across his face. Real fear. "People don't just walk away from my family." "Then why are you here?" she asked. "With me? What's the point of this if you are just going to become what they expect?" "Because when I'm with you, I remember there's another way to live." He looked at her, and the honesty in his eyes made her chest tight. "You make me want to be better, and that terrifies me." That night, walking back to her apartment, he asked about her father. She'd mentioned him before, but never in detail. Something about the quiet street, the late hour, made her finally tell the full story. The cancer, the betrayal, the boxes on the porch, how her entire world collapsed in 3 weeks. He listened, his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, his face unreadable. When she finished, he stopped walking. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he said. "And I'm sorry the world made you think you deserved it." "I never said I thought that," she replied. You didn't have to." He started walking again. "It's in the way you apologize for taking up space. The way you make yourself small so other people can be big. You've been taught that's survival. But Alara, you shouldn't have to shrink for anyone." She changed the subject. Had to, because he was seeing too much, getting too close to truth she'd buried under 6 years of survival mode. But that was the problem with Luciano. He was dangerous not because of what he could do to her, but because of what he made her feel. Hope, possibility, the idea that maybe her life could be more than just getting through each day. And hope, when you've lost everything, is the most dangerous thing of all. He asked about her father again the next week. She changed the subject again, and he let her, but his eyes held questions she wasn't ready to answer. But fate was already weaving their names into the same storm. And the thing about storms is you never see them coming until you're already drowning. If you've ever cared for someone from a world darker than yours, stay with me. Because this is where hearts and danger collide, where choices get complicated and easy answers disappear. You're going to want to see how this unfolds. Here's something they don't tell you about working in restaurants. You see things people forget you're there to witness. Conversations that stop when you approach. Envelopes passed under tables. Phone calls taken in the corner where the lighting's bad. After 6 years, Alara had learned to unsee most of it. Safer that way. Smarter. But some things you can't unsee, even when you wish you could. It was a Tuesday morning, early. Alara had come in 2 hours before her shift to help Giorgio with inventory. The restaurant was closed, quiet except for the hum of refrigerators and the occasional creak of old pipes. She was in the back office, counting bottles of wine, when she noticed the filing cabinet drawer was open, just slightly, like someone had closed it in a hurry and it hadn't latched. She almost left it alone. Almost. But something made her curious. Maybe it was the way Giorgio had been acting lately. Nervous, jumpy, avoiding eye contact. Or maybe it was the black car she'd seen parked outside 3 nights in a row, windows tinted, nobody getting out. She opened the drawer, just to close it properly. That's what she told herself. Inside were the usual things. Tax documents, supplier contracts, employee records. Nothing unusual. But beneath a stack of invoices, her fingers brushed against something else. A folder, unmarked, heavier than it should be. She pulled it out, opened it, and her entire world tilted. Photographs. Dozens of them. Paintings she recognized from her art history classes. A Caravaggio that had been stolen from a church in Naples 10 years ago. A Renaissance sculpture missing from a private collection in Florence. Pieces worth millions, each one photographed from multiple angles with notes in the margins. Prices, dates, buyer codes. Beneath the photographs were documents. Shipping manifests with false declarations. Custom stamps that looked official but had numbers that didn't match any system she knew. And at the bottom, contracts. Legal-looking papers with signatures she couldn't quite read in the dim light. She pulled one closer to the lamp. The signature was clear, elegant, unmistakable. Marcelli. Her hand started shaking. She flipped through more documents. More signatures. Some said Marcelli imports. Others just had the family crest. A lion with a crown. The same crest she'd seen on Luciano's ring. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't just about Giorgio. This was about the entire operation. The restaurant was a front. A cleaning house for stolen art moving through the port. And the Marcelli family was running it. She heard footsteps. Panicked, she shoved everything back into the folder, back into the drawer, closed it as quietly as possible. Giorgio appeared in the doorway, holding a clipboard. "You okay back here?" he asked. His voice was too casual, his eyes too sharp. "Fine," she said, standing up too fast. "Just finishing the wine count." He nodded slowly, looked at the filing cabinet, looked at her. "Good. Don't forget to lock up when you're done." Then he left, but she felt his suspicion lingering in the air like smoke. Alara stood alone in that office for 5 full minutes, her mind racing. She should forget this. Pretend she never saw it. People who found things like this in places like this didn't live long enough to regret it. She knew that. Everyone knew that. But she also knew those paintings belonged to someone. To museums. To families. To history. And they were being sold to private collectors who'd hide them away forever. Stolen beauty turned into profit. Culture erased for cash. And Luciano was part of it. The man who'd been walking her home. Who'd been making her laugh. Who'd been making her believe that maybe people really could change. His family's name was on every document. His legacy was built on theft. She felt sick, betrayed, stupid. Of course he was involved. What had she expected? That a Mafia heir would be clean? That their conversations meant he was somehow exempt from his family's crimes? She'd been so careful to protect her heart, and somehow it had gotten involved anyway. That night, Luciano came to the restaurant. Same time as always. Same corner table. Same warm smile when he saw her. But this time, she couldn't smile back. She took his order mechanically, avoided his eyes, brought his food without conversation. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked when she set down his plate. "No," she lied. "Just tired." He didn't believe her. She could tell. But he didn't push. Just ate quietly, watching her move through the restaurant, probably trying to figure out what changed. She went home that night and didn't sleep. Just stared at her ceiling, thinking about those documents. About the choice sitting in front of her like a loaded gun. She could expose it, call the authorities, give them everything she'd seen, do the right thing. But the right thing could get her killed, could get Giorgio killed, could destroy the only job she had. And what about Luciano? Did she owe him anything? Did their conversations mean he deserved a warning? Her fingers trembled over the signature she recognized. The Marcelli name burned into her memory, and she realized the worst part wasn't what she discovered. It was the decision she now had to make. Stay silent and become complicit, or speak up and risk everything, including her life. She decided to face the lion one last time, because some truths are too big to swallow, and some silences cost more than speaking ever could. What would you do? Speak up or stay silent? Comment your answer. Let's see how brave we really are, because what comes next will test every belief you have about right and wrong, safety and courage, love and justice. Rain has a way of making everything feel final, like the world's washing away whatever came before, getting ready to start over. That's what it felt like the night Alara decided to stop running from the truth. It had been 3 days since she found those documents. 3 days of avoiding Luciano's calls. 3 days of lying awake, playing out every possible scenario in her head. 3 days of being a coward. But tonight, standing outside La Serena Blue in the pouring rain, watching him park his car across the street, she knew she couldn't hide anymore. He saw her immediately, grabbed an umbrella from his back seat, and jogged over, holding it above both of them. "Alara, what's wrong? You haven't answered my calls. You won't talk to me. Did someone hurt you? Because if someone hurt you, I'll—" "Stop," she cut him off. Her voice was steadier than she felt. "We need to talk. Alone. Not here." Something in her tone made his face go serious. He nodded. "My car." "No. Walk with me." They walked 3 blocks in silence, the umbrella barely keeping them dry, rain soaking through their shoes. She led him to a small park, empty because of the weather, just a couple of benches under a shelter that leaked. They sat. He waited. "I found something," she said finally. "At the restaurant. Documents. Photographs. Shipping manifests. All of it connected to stolen art. Pieces worth millions. And your family's name was on everything." He went completely still. Didn't deny it. Didn't act surprised. Just stared straight ahead, rain dripping off the shelter's edge. "How much did you see?" he asked quietly. "Enough." She turned to face him. "Is it true? Is your family trafficking stolen art?" He was silent for a long moment. Then, yes. The single word hit her like a punch. She'd hoped he'd deny it. Make up some explanation that let her keep believing in the version of him she'd been talking to for weeks. But he didn't lie. He just confirmed the worst. "My uncle runs that operation," Luciano continued, his voice flat. "He's been doing it for 15 years. Uses restaurants, shipping companies, legitimate businesses as covers. Giorgio doesn't have a choice. He either cooperates or loses everything. Maybe worse." He finally looked at her. "And I knew about it. Not the details, but enough. I knew, and I did nothing." "What?" The word came out broken. "You told me you wanted to be better. You said I made you see another way. Was any of that true?" "All of it was true." His jaw tightened. "But wanting to be better and actually doing it are different things." "You were right about that. I've been a coward. Telling myself I'm not really involved, that it's my uncle's operation, not mine. That I can keep my hands clean while still benefiting from dirty money. I've been lying to myself. And to you." The rain got heavier. Thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. Alara felt like her chest was caving in. "So what now? I just pretend I didn't see anything? Go back to serving tables while stolen history gets sold to the highest bidder?" "No." He turned to fully face her. "No, you shouldn't do that. You should do what you came here to do. Tell me I need to fix this. Tell me to prove I'm not like them. Prove to me you're not like them," she said. The words came out fierce, desperate. "Because right now, you're just another rich man who talks about change, but does nothing. And I can't." Her voice cracked. "I can't care about someone like that." He looked at her like she was holding his soul in her hands. Maybe she was. "If I do this," he said slowly, "if I really do this, I can't go back. My family will see it as betrayal. My uncle will come after me. Everything I've known my entire life will be gone. Then you'll know what it feels like," she said. "To lose, it just shows up, usually on the nights you're least prepared." That's what happened to Luciano Marcelli 5 days after his conversation in the rain with Alara. The disappointment. "I heard you've been collecting souvenirs, family photos, business records, planning a scrapbook." Luciano didn't run. "What would be the point? It's over, Marco. I gave him everything. The prosecutors have it all. Coming after me won't stop what's already in motion." Marco smiled. Not a happy smile. A smile that promised pain. "You stupid boy. You think turning on your family makes you noble? It makes you a traitor. And traitors, in our world, don't get redemption. They get examples made of them." What happened next happened fast. Marco's men moved in. Luciano fought back, managed to take down 2 of them before the rest overwhelmed him. Fists. Boots. The crack of ribs breaking. The taste of blood. He curled up, tried to protect his head, knowing this might be how it ended. Then gunshots. 3 of them. Loud enough to freeze everyone. The beating stopped. Through blurred vision, Luciano saw them. Federal agents. Dozens of them, pouring through every entrance. The prosecutor hadn't trusted Marco not to retaliate. Had put Luciano under surveillance. Had been waiting for exactly this. Marco tried to run. Didn't make it 10 feet. They tackled him, cuffed him, read him his rights while he screamed about lawyers and rights and corruption. His men surrendered without a fight. Turned out loyalty only goes so far when federal prison is on the table. Luciano was taken to a hospital. Broken ribs, concussion, split lip, bruises that would take weeks to heal. But alive. Barely, but alive. The doctors said he was lucky. He didn't feel lucky. He felt like he'd just burned down everything he'd ever known. The next 2 weeks were chaos. The Marcelli operation collapsed. Arrests were made. Assets frozen. Stolen artwork recovered and returned to rightful owners. Churches got their paintings back. Museums reclaimed sculptures that had been missing for decades. The news covered it for days. Called it the biggest art trafficking bust in 20 years. Luciano testified. Told him everything. Names, dates, methods. Buried his family's legacy with his own words. His mother stopped taking his calls. His father, sick and old, disowned him publicly. Former friends crossed the street when they saw him coming. He became a ghost in his own life. Invisible in a different way than Alara had ever been. But he didn't regret it. Couldn't. Because for the first time in his life, he could sleep without nightmares. Could look in a mirror and recognize the person looking back. Could walk down a street without wondering which of his successes were built on someone else's suffering. When he finally got out of the hospital, bruised and broken, but free, he went back to La Serena Blue. Just to see it one more time. The restaurant was closed. Permanently. Giorgio had retired, taken his payout from the federal government's witness protection program, moved somewhere quiet. The building sat empty, windows dark, a for lease sign in the window. He stood outside, remembering the night it all started. The insult, the response, the moment he met someone who refused to let him hide. And he wondered if she knew, if she'd seen the news, if she understood that everything that happened, all the destruction and rebuilding, started with her words in Italian and her refusal to stay silent. Days turned into months. The chair he once occupied stayed empty. Not at the restaurant, that was gone, but in her life, in her thoughts, in the space between what was and what might have been, until one morning, the black car returned. Different driver, different purpose, but the same impossible choice sitting in the back seat, holding something that would change everything one more time. If you've ever lost someone you thought you'd never see again, don't move. Stay right here, because the ending is worth every second of pain we've been through together. This story isn't over yet, not by a long shot. 6 months. That's how long it took for the world to settle into its new shape. 6 months of Alara working a new job at a bookstore, away from restaurants and their dark corners. 6 months of reading about the Marcelli case in newspapers, wondering if he was okay, if he regretted it, if he thought about her. 6 months of telling herself she did the right thing, that pushing him toward truth was worth the cost, even if it meant never seeing him again. It was a Tuesday morning when he found her. She was shelving books in the history section, lost in thought, when a voice behind her said, "Do you have anything on Renaissance art? I'm trying to learn the difference between stolen beauty and earned beauty." She turned, and there he was, Luciano Marcelli, thinner than she remembered. A scar above his left eyebrow she didn't recognize. But his eyes were different, clearer, like someone had lifted a weight he'd been carrying his whole life. "You're alive," she said. The words came out shakier than she intended. "Barely. Your standards are high." He smiled, but it was tentative, uncertain. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "I wasn't sure either," she admitted. "But I'm glad you're here. What happened to you?" They talked for 20 minutes right there in the history section. He told her everything. The evidence, the confrontation, the beating, the trials, the collapse of his family's empire, the isolation that followed. He left nothing out. No glory, no heroics, just a messy truth of what it cost to choose conscience over comfort. "I don't have much anymore," he said. "The prosecutors let me keep a small account. Enough to start over. Everything else went to restitution, victim funds, legal fees. I'm living in a studio apartment in Queens, working as a translator. Turns out my language skills are good for something legal." He laughed, but it sounded tired. "My family won't speak to me. Most of my old friends think I'm a traitor. But I can sleep now. Actually sleep. So I guess that's worth it." Alara studied his face. Saw the truth there. The genuine change. Not the kind you talk about, the kind you bleed for. I'm proud of you, she said quietly. I know that probably doesn't mean much, but I am. It means everything. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Plain, unmarked. I came here to give you this. Then I'll leave if you want me to. She took the envelope, opened it. Inside was a letter. Official letterhead. Columbia University. Her hand started shaking before she even read it. Scholarship reinstatement. Full tuition. Living stipend. Graduate program in linguistics. Starting next semester. Ow. The word barely made it out. The federal case, he explained. Part of the recovered assets went to a victim's fund. I made sure some of it went to educational programs for people who'd been hurt by organized crime. Your name came up. Your record. Your professors still remembered you. They jumped at the chance to bring you back. He paused. You gave me back my conscience, Alara. The least I could do was give you back your future. She couldn't speak, just stared at the letter, at the words that meant everything, at the second chance she thought she'd never get. Tears she'd been holding for 6 years finally broke free. Not sad tears. Relief. Joy. The overwhelming weight of hope realized. Thank you, she managed. Luciano, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. He smiled. A real smile this time. Peaceful. Complete. You taught me that power isn't about who you can hurt. It's about who you can help. And dignity isn't something you're born with. It's something you choose. Every day, in every small decision. He stepped back. I should go. Let you get back to work. Will I see you again? She asked. He paused at the end of the aisle. Turned back. I don't know. Maybe that's not how this story ends. Maybe we were just supposed to save each other and move on. But if you ever need anything at all, you know how to find me. Luciano. He stopped. You're not empty anymore. His eyes held hers for one long moment. Then he nodded. Neither are you. And he left. No dremati gudvie. No promises of forever. Just respect. Just two people who'd pulled each other out of darkness and were brave enough to walk toward the light alone. Alara stood there, holding her future in her hands, and understood something important. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it's just one person refusing to stay silent. One person choosing truth over safety. One person believing that change is possible, even when everything says give up. She went back to school that fall, graduated 2 years later with honors, became a translator for the UN, helping recover stolen cultural artifacts, using her voice to return history to its rightful owners. She thought about him sometimes, wondered if he was happy, if he found his peace, if he ever regretted the choice he made in the rain. She hoped he didn't, because their story, messy and complicated and painful as it was, proved something the world needs to remember. Power isn't in the taking, it's in the giving back. And sometimes, the shy waitress teaches the Mafia heir what power truly means. If Alara's story touched your heart, show it with a like and a share. Leave a comment below telling us what this story meant to you. Was there a moment that hit different? A choice that made you think? Share your thoughts. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Remember, sometimes justice whispers. And when it does, even the powerful learn to listen. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this. Stories of courage. Stories of redemption. Stories that remind us we're all capable of change, no matter where we started. Hit that notification bell. We've got more stories coming that will challenge you, inspire you, and maybe, just maybe, change how you see the world. See you in the next one, and thank you for being part of this family. Your support means everything.